Hello, my name is Richard Haight, and today I'd like to explore the differences between the view of theism, atheism, polytheism, and spirituality as a whole, and what starts to occur when the spiritual process is no longer filtered through the structures of the mind. As we practice certain types of meditation, especially if our intention is correct and sincere in the practice, what starts to happen is the filters of the mind start to kind of strip away, and we may go through these different perceptions that are, for lack of a better term, we'll call them realer than real in terms of the content of the perception. It feels more real, more important, more powerful, more authentic than is what most people would describe as the mundane perception of life. Now, I'm going to separate out the type of the individual who is only studying these things from a mental perspective, which means from a non-experiential perspective, that are coming purely from the mind and in the attempt to understand. So, for example, the very hard orthodox, maybe we might say orthodox Christian, letter of the law. It's very mental. It's all knowledge. You have a checklist of things you got to be doing and following. It could be a Muslim. It could be it doesn't matter really what religion, but you've kind of going through these things, your religious tenets and dogmas, and like they're fixed laws. And this is at a very mental or shallow level, really. Although they would maybe base their entire lives off of it, it creates a tremendous amount of disharmony. And it actually creates a lot of disharmony in the body itself. I do a kind of testing. So I'm trained in martial arts. And so, for example, I will grab on to a person in such a way that they normally wouldn't be able to move. And if they're in if their way of being is such that there's a sense of connectedness, they will somehow magically be able to move. But a person who's sort of a fundamentalist religious type individual who is coming from this very mentally, they won't be able to move. But the same is true of the atheist. It's a very mental thing, atheism. And it's the assumption that they know what is and what is not fundamentally true. And they're two opposite extremes. These two opposite extremes at the level of mind can never see eye to eye. It would be probably a really hard thing to have a fundamentally religious individual and an atheist spend too much time together. They're going to butt heads. There's almost no avoiding it. And that's one of them was just a very submissive type and was willing to just suppress their feelings. But basically, these two arguments are mental and emotional. And then, of course, you have the range of different types of spirituality in between. That animalism or I guess animatism, I guess they might call it, spiritualism and these things. And some of those are also highly of the mind in that they make use of a lot of imagination and emotion. But And now this is not a judgment about any of these things, because as we start walking the spiritual path very deeply and authentically, while questioning everything we've ever been taught, except questioning everything we've ever believed, playfully, that's the key point, playfully exploring it. And most importantly, embodying the exploration, embodying the changes. What will start to occur is perception will start to change, and we may have along this path a variety of different, for lack of a better term, we can call them visionary experiences, or mystical experiences might be a better way of saying it. And there are different types of these mystical experiences that could occur. Fundamentally, at their core, they're really the same, but they appear and feel very different. And then what will happen is, after these experiences, the mind will then seek to understand those experiences, box it up, and give it a definition. So, for example, you may be in a profound state of inner silence and awareness, and you feel presence. You feel everything has a spirit. The walls themselves are aware, and you can communicate with them. You walk through the forest, and the plants will be, you will be communicating with you. And so quite naturally, then the mind will say, well, everything has an individual spirit, which may be true, by the way. But that everything has an individual spirit. And like the Japanese, the religion of Shintoism, each of these, even the chair or the lantern or the pen, or all of these things have an individual spirit that Westerners, when they first heard this, translated then into that spirit into gods. There's all these different gods. So it's polytheism. It's not really how it's thought of in the Japanese culture. The term God is a Western term. And so they just overlaid a Western terminology onto the Japanese original sort of religion, which is Shinto, polytheism. But really, it's just everything has individuated spirit. So that's one level in which we may have a mystical experience, and may even get some valuable life corrective information, possibly. And it definitely, when it happens, it's realer than real. And you might call it a hallucination, but it's not just a hallucination. What I mean by that is, a psychotic person or whatever, was that a psychotic break or whatever, they may be having hallucinations all the time, but these hallucinations are not productive. They don't create greater function in life. They're not corrective of the inner space. They don't allow for a greater harmony of being. And in fact, it's oppositely so. They may become dysfunctional and unable to differentiate between these visionary experiences that are very deeply disturbing, possibly, and regular life. And so they may see you and you look like a demon to them, and that kind of thing. So what I'm talking about, these mystical experiences, nothing to do with psychosis. I'm talking about something that creates a greater sense of harmony and function in the world for the human being. It's a corrective process, not a disturbing, life-disturbing process. And so another way in which we may experience is actually similar to what I describe in The Unbound Soul. It's an isness experience where there's a sense of you communicating with this universal being. It's like you're communicating with the source of all that is. And it would be very easy to say that is, and that's sort of in a way how I interpreted it, as God. And I believe that is maybe the origin of theism. I mean, you go back very, very far, and people have this concept of the one God or whatever, that kind of thing. And this is a presence that is throughout all that is, but it can be experienced through the sense of self. I mean, you can still have the sense of who you are and experience that and communicate with that and get extremely valuable information, life-correcting information. And so that would be the source, or could be the source of where theism comes from. Now, certainly monotheism. So like the one God concept that would be encapsulated in Middle Eastern religions like Islam and Christianity and Judaism. Well, more recent kind of Judaism. There's actually, you go back far enough, it starts to kind of, that one God concept, it actually becomes a we, there's more than one, which I find fascinating. And so you've got that perspective. But the polytheism and the monotheism are just different perceptions of the same thing. And then you have, we'll call this a oneness experience. The next one is where the sense of self slips away entirely. There is no individual content. There's just simply being, and it is universal. And the inner and outer dimensions just strip away, and all that is seen is unus, for lack of a better term. And this can be extremely informative too. And it's inspiring. It's unutterably inspiring. It's awe-inspiring. All of these things. So I find that polytheism, that I've had all of these perspectives through my experience. All of them are incredibly inspiring and useful. The most awe-inspiring, such that words can absolutely just, the attempt to explain these things in words is preposterous. I mean, you realize that there's simply no way, no word you can say all that is. But I was like, that is such a shallow description of it. It does it absolutely no justice. All these things, they're truly unutterably awe-inspiring. And so that's the theist perspective, or the perspective of like self communicating with God, an unformed God. And then there's the perspective of self, then there's the all that is, where self is stripped away and is direct. And there again, once the sense of self returns, the mind then wants to turn that into some sort of, kind of bottle it and be able to, hand these little bottles of God juice out to everybody. Or was it Buddha juice? I guess it's not a God perspective, a Buddha juice. But let's say that you only had the non-dual perspective, where it was just one with all that is. There is no individual whatsoever. It's just, the Buddha head or Buddha mind, or whatever you want to call it. And so it would not appear as, as if a separate entity. Then you would say, God is a lie. That's not true. If that's the only experience you've had. That's an incorrect perspective. That's a lower perspective. But what is it that's saying that? It's the mind that is saying that. And when the mind's saying that, it's no longer connected to that one with all it is perspective. It's not coming from awareness. The statement itself that, that's, theism is false. It's not coming from awareness. It's coming from knowledge. And it's not true knowledge. It's false knowledge. You once had the experience of direct awareness. Then you came back into the mind and then boxed that into knowledge. And that is truth. Now it's a memory and knowledge. It's not awareness anymore, because you're not having it right now. It's something that you have taken ownership over and authority over. And now from that perspective, a mind perspective, you're judging theism. You're judging the other idea that there could be the individual communicating with the source or Godhead or whatever, as if that's a lower understanding or an illusion. But the real illusion is you, the mind. Right there, as you're saying that that's an illusion, that's mind content stuff. That's knowledge-based stuff. It's not awareness. So it's actually you that's, well, not you, but your mind, the mind, which is projecting out on the other individuals. Awareness maybe, that awareness is false and that you've got it right. And so now you've got these two factions, because the person who may have had the Godhead experience and not had the all that is experience, where there was no sense of self and never experienced that, no idea about it, to them, the awe and the beauty and the wisdom and the unutterable presence and magnificence of that, of the Godhead, is worship, it's the only thing worthy of worship. It's the only thing worthy of devotion. It transcends all else. But there still is a sense of self. And now they hear someone talking about this oneness experience, who's saying that their Godhead experience is bullshit. And so then they go, well, you're wrong. There is a God. You just never experienced it. You just don't have enough awareness yet, or you're just misled, or that was all an illusion. You're worshiping some false thing. You're worshiping you, and you should worship something other than you, bigger than you. And so then, and what's happened, of course, is that person's maybe become defensive. They've taken an ownership of what was once awareness, because once they're no longer in that awareness, the mind kicks in and now has boxed it into this is God, and all that goes with theism. And now I am the authority because I've had this experience. The idea is I know because I've had this experience, and you haven't. You don't know, and so your idea is false. And so we've two people who have had, fundamentally, when you've seen through deeply enough, and you've had all of these perspectives, so then you've also had the polytheism perspective. You might say, well, there's many gods or many spirits. Everything has a spirit. The idea that there's only one, that's ridiculous. And the people who have had just the communication with the Godhead go, oh, well, you're worshiping false gods, that there's many gods, that's ridiculous, just arguing, but they're not arguing from awareness. They're arguing from mind. When they're in that awareness, when that awareness is present and the mind is quiet, there is no war between these things. There is no debate. And so what happens is you have, say, a spiritual leader who's had this particular, non-dualistic oneness, direct experience, no self. We'll say that maybe Buddha was one who represents that pretty well. And then we have Jesus Christ, who may have had the Father-Son perspective. So there's the self, and then there's the Father. I suspect he had both. Listening to his, reading his words and things like that, seems actually he's had both of these. And then you may have, but maybe a founder. He didn't found a religion, but other people think he founded the religion. His followers deem him as the founder. But anyway, so the followers hear his teachings, and they may not have had the experience. So all the teachings from step number one are translated through mind, and they've never had the awareness. It's all knowledge. It's only knowledge. And it's unfounded knowledge. It's unexplored knowledge. It's just ideas, ideology. And the same thing with, say the Buddha's followers, some of them that may not have had the experience. Certainly we have people now that haven't had the experience, but Buddhism is correct. It's unfounded knowledge because it's not based on any exploration or wisdom, direct experience. The same thing with polytheism, right? You can have an individual that has walked through the forest and communicated with the trees. Shaman do this, you see a plant and they just know, what its herbal properties are, how to use it. And you ask them about it and they'll say, well, the plant told me. I've had this experience many times. And made wonderfully effective, non-formulaic herbal remedies. I can't say how it happens. And then the next day it might be for the same ailment, a different formula. Bodies change, the plants change, different time of day, whatever, but they're waving their hands saying, use me, use me, use me. Is that false? These are just These are just these are experiences. And all of them, when you strip away the images and relax ever more deeply into these experiences, you start to see an underlying element. And when that happens, there can be peace between these perspectives. And so you could have the Buddhist perspective, which in a way we could say is non-theistic, or even maybe an atheist could be a Buddhist, right? But if that atheist strips away the ideology of atheism and recognizes that it's possible to have this Godhead experience, and it's not false. False. I mean, to say that it's false or it's an illusion, that one is higher than the other or something like that, is just, you're removing the value of it. You're removing the value of it, because there is absolutely no experience that does not have illusory aspects to it, because all experiences has some filters to it. And everything that you've ever valued in your life, well, there's simply, to say that life has no value, no inherent value, is to say that living has no inherent value. And the very fact of saying that would mean, you know, why are you wasting your time drinking water and breathing? The fact is, every single cell in the body has values. It has something that it's seeking and something that it's excreting or avoiding, which has an inherent biological value system, nutrient versus toxin. Just as everything that you do, there's nothing that you do or do not do that is without value to you, either consciously or unconsciously. And so it becomes atheism, theism, and polytheism. When one's seen the holistic view of it, we can see that all of these views can be functionally correct, but are also incorrect. We can see that if the mind clings to it, all of these views are incorrect. If it stays within awareness, all of these views become very functional and provide value, deeper value to every moment of our lives. And if we relax into it, we may have had originally one experience, so let's say the theist experience, but if we relax into it and we don't cling to that, then that leaves a space open so that we may also the next day have a polytheistic experience that's just as valuable. A year later or whatever, we may have a completely non-dualistic experience of just being, and that's just as valuable. And it's the mind that would order rank these things. So we'll say that polytheism is the lowest perspective, and then theism is the second higher, a little bit higher perspective. And then, you know, that kind of, you hear that, you know, and depending on who you're from, it could be a reverse order. All of that is of the mind. It creates disharmony. If you pay attention to that which creates disharmony, and that which pulls one out of direct awareness and into knowledge, you discover the illusion of it. And you start to soften these things such that all of these perspectives are beautiful, awe-inspiring, just as is the quote-unquote mundane experience. There isn't any experience that is higher or lower. That's all order ranking done by the mind. It's based on assumptions. It's arrogant at its core, but it is also not without value. At a fundamental level, the mind serves survival purposes. And if the mind is not able to differentiate between that which is functional or valuable, the body cannot survive. So at a fundamental level, that rank ordering is important, but it's really only important at a survival level. Once we get beyond that, we need to move into a higher level of awareness, where we start to actually transcend instinct. We start to harmonize the body. In such a case, that requires stepping beyond the dualistic perspective to some degree, or some, let's say the judgmental perspective to some degree, and allow for direct experience without interpretation, without judgment, because we can gain value from tremendous value from each of these experiences. The main thing that we gain from these experiences, if the mind is in its proper place, is an unlearning. It's not a learning. If we go into the spiritual experience, and I'm not meaning religious experience, but the spiritual experience with the deepest of integrity, what will happen is a great unlearning begins to occur. We hold on to memory and learning, eventually we'll reach a place where awareness becomes a curse. And this is something that probably most people who've had the theistic experience deeply enough, and the well, I guess any of these experiences could bring about this effect, but if you've had that deep, any of these experiences deeply enough, later on everything in you wants to have that experience again. You just like, that's the most, that is the highest value. Whatever the experience was the highest value to you. It becomes the highest value, and all you want is to get back there. You just want to get back there. That is also the mind holding on to, trying to, assuming that there is a separation from that. And it creates an inner tension and dissatisfaction with life, because this is somehow lower and that is higher. And it's a kind of hell. It's a great disharmony. And then your life becomes rather miserable. And so all of these, the spiritual path is, in a lot of ways, is kind of the straight and narrow. I mean, it sounds boxed, but I don't think that's what fundamentally Jesus meant by the straight and narrow. Anything that pulls into knowledge, any clinging of any sort, becomes a barrier. And so there's this very subtle awareness of moving through memory and knowledge and desire and expectation, rank ordering, comparisons, and all that, so that there can be space, there can be a little bit of spaciousness for these things, these experiences to occur. The war between the religions and ideologies, which atheism, theism, polytheism, all of these at the level of mind are just ideologies. The level of mind create a tremendous degree of disharmony. So long as we're stuck in mind, that's where it's going to be. And there's going to be this disharmony in the world. And the transcendence of that becomes such that we can see there's a core of truth in each of these perspectives, a core of truth. They're sort of hints, but it's not, it's just a hint that will sort of lead you in a direction if you're really willing to explore. But once you've gone deep enough down that exploration, you can look at those three and go, oh, well, yeah, but they're also very, very misleading. Atheism is very misleading. And theism is very misleading. Polytheism is very misleading. So it's almost like we take whatever little grain of truth that's in these things and we move with that, and we have to sort of set aside or discard everything else, at least for us, recognizing that other people may still need those, may still want or need or can make use of those vehicles. There's no need to destroy them. There's no need to destroy them. Yes, religion has caused a tremendous degree of disharmony in the world, but reality is it's the human's mind perception of religion that causes the issues. It's not, it's very important to recognize if we take a little time to breathe and relax and explore and strip away everything that causes disharmony. I don't mean external stuff, like it's good to have external challenges. It's really, really useful to have things challenging your sense of connectedness and oneness. So we don't want to strip that away. just the ideas that when clung to blind us. There are certain ideas when clung to blind us. So if you have a religion that can't be questioned, well, you're stuck then. It's a snake eating its tail. You're just stuck in this loop of disharmony, and it'll create wars and all kinds of havoc. If your religion tells you you should go and convert everybody, well then, you know, to be in that religion, well, there again, you're going to be creating a lot of disharmony because a lot of people simply don't want to hear it. They don't want to be converted. You're just assuming you're right and they're wrong. It's pretty arrogant. It's pretty arrogant. So the bottom line is that there are these different perspectives, and the perspective of actually walking the path of awakening is stepping out of these, of the formulaic mind perspectives of these religions. And then we start to see, oh, well, now I've had maybe the theist experience, the actual experience of communicating with the Godhead, or, you know, the Buddha mind, or the polytheistic kind of spirit, everything as a spirit. You've had the actual experience, profoundly so. So you can recognize, that's probably where the founder of these religions got it from. And then as he's talking about it, gets filtered through the mind, and people start writing it down 100 years, 150, 200 years later, and it's all distorted and a mess. And then they try to use that idea to create a society around. So they got to create all these different rules and structures that had nothing to do with the original experience. It's just like all the scaffolding built around an idea that they heard from someone who had a direct experience, and it just creates a tremendous phenomenon. But that is the basis of culture. So we also cannot say that that's wrong. That is just simply what happens. It is what happens. And if you are able to take joy and relax into the experience of life, it allows other people to relax a little bit, and so that we can. It's sort of an infectious thing, and so that we don't have to be stuck in the realm of ideas, and we can move ever more toward direct experience. And we no longer need the vehicles of religion at that point. It's direct. And that direct experience, whoever's having it, doesn't mean that that person is any more or less spiritual than anyone else. There are no, you don't get any extra credit, spirit points, or anything for any of this. There's no such thing as an elevated soul, or, you know, all that idea. That's all mind stuff. We're just talking about experience. We're just talking about experience, and what potentiates a fuller, more joyous experience in life. You know, in the end, these bodies are alive. This is the experience we're having, and why not engage in it in a way that allows it to be the most enjoyable, healthy, fulfilling experience possible? Why turn it into hell by trying to box it? So I hope you find this video useful. If you have any questions, go ahead and you can make comments below, or send me an email at contact@richardhaight.net. If you'd like these videos and you'd like to keep them going and support the channel, donations are very, very welcome and appreciated. And also, I do have a free 13-part spiritual awakening course on my website, www.richardhaight.net. Go there and sign up. You'll love it. And so you'll get an email a couple times a week with lessons or insights for your daily practice. And see you there. Bye.